it's piqued my interest. As I've said, for anybody who doesn't know, I've been ill for like the last week. I was catching up on Zenless Zone Zero, ready for 1.2, ready for 1.3 of Wuthering Waves as well. And then I got food poisoning, so I haven't tried out any of the new content in either yet. But we need to talk about Zenless Zone Zero 1.2, and on the thumbnail, it said it's bad. I'm interested. Is he? Is he? Red new. Do you know what? I'm going to drop a preemptive sub, preemptive like. Let's see what the video's got to say then. Is 1.2 trash?
Red new. And in this video, we're going to be talking about my problem with Zenless Zone Zero 1.2 story. Now, I do have a react video for...
Oh, do I really want to watch this thing? Because, like, not that I'm here for the, you know, like, that I'm like, oh my god, I've been spoiled for a gacha story, I guess, but... whatever.
For this, and I was thinking about putting that out.
We'll see. I'll see if I have to back out in a second.
Scrap that, make this video instead, in case anyone wanted to engage with this and discuss with this video specifically. So, what are my thoughts on 1.2 story? Now, it took me a while to come to this conclusion. At first, I did really enjoy 1.2. I did really enjoy 1.2 as a story and playing through it. And I thought that what the devs decided to do, which is the complete removal of TV mode from the story, I thought it was...
Oh, has it been totally took out the story already then? Has he?
A case of them listening and, you know, garnering that player feedback, and as well just respecting it and, you know, fulfilling their wish in the best way possible. After a few streams, and if you've watched my streams, you know exactly what I'm going to be saying in this video, twitch.tv/rednew23, by the way, you'll know exactly what I'm going to say in this video and what my thoughts on 1.2 story are.
Okay.
And my thoughts about 1.2 story...
Is it a case of, you know, you don't know what you've got till it's gone? Is it like the TV system's gone? He's like, oh no. Now, because for me, I like the TV system. I just don't think it works well within a storytelling vehicle. I'd rather just have something a little bit like Star Rail, where I can explore like a sort of linear, straightforward little section in between combat and little potential POIs here and there that interact and give you like little, even maybe just even little like comic cut streams to show you what's going on. I'd be happy with that. But I like the TV system as a whole, just not in the story.
It has nothing to do with the narrative. It has nothing to do with the cutscenes. It has nothing to do with the characters. I love the cutscenes in this game.
What
I don't like about 1.2 story is purely about the gameplay. And what I don't like is the complete removal of TV mode.
So I was kind of right then.
So what do I not like about it?
Hold up. Before we get into the video, I just want to see what the comment section's saying. Display 1.2, and I've got to say it was peak, short and straight to the point, no filler. One of the better implements of TV mode is Chapter 3, where the ghost chases. But yeah, I like that. I like that. I actually think it's quite a cool, unique way to do, well, not so much story beats, but to do like progress in a game. I think it's a really interesting thing, the TV system is. And for things like that, it can be used quite well. You know, like little mechanical parts of the game when you're supposedly doing something and you do it via the TVs. I like that. But I think it's just that, for me personally, now I'm terrible with keeping, you know, focused anyway. It just became kind of like this abstract distraction from what was going on with the story because it felt like it was out of context of what I was actually doing. Although you can see what you're doing, but because you're doing it through the TV system, it doesn't feel like you're doing what you're doing. And there's like this layer between you, and I felt like it kind of removed me a little bit from what was going on, which I wasn't a fan of. But the system itself, quite liked. The only place where complete removal of the TV work is in the MCs and not involved in the story, like with Jane chapter, especially. I agree with that as well, yeah, because it makes sense as well, because it is you, the proxy, operating with your team, isn't it? It's like the realization of you sitting at your computer doing your thing, isn't it? Really. Okay, all right.
1.2 story was disappointing because TV mode was ripped out. And
did it really?
I choose my words very carefully here in terms of like how to say that TV mode was removed. TV mode was ripped out because what happened is we got less of a game. There were some moments that were...
This might only happen for 1.2 though, right? Because I'm thinking... You've got the TV mode for these little story beats where it's like you mechanically going from A to B. and doing these little things in between the combat, right? In between the instances. It's a traversal of the thing you're doing. They want to take it out because people are asking it to take it out. Right, we'll take it out. Because 1.2 was so close around, that literally means you're losing the part of the game, you know, because that story beat isn't going to be happening. I don't know how they've changed it, whether it's just going straight into panel cutscenes or characters are talking about it as they're doing things. I don't know, you know? So it makes sense that you're potentially, you're losing something. You're not gaining anything in that regard. But hopefully in future updates, they start to build the game around not having the system in for the story beats of the game. So you are actually doing those things, or at least most of them. Some things are a little bit too grandiose, I think, to be able to do within the Zenless zone design philosophy, the way the game works, to be able to, I don't know, to be able to stop a freaking train, or, you know, to slow a train down to jump on it. You're probably not going to be doing that. But where you may be going around a building, keeping lights on and stuff, and having those sort of mechanics, that could be implemented within the game itself, couldn't it?
Not very good because TV mode was removed from the game. And as well, I feel like some parts were added in to compensate for it where it just didn't feel good at all. So what am I talking about? Well, in order for me to like explain to you, we had to hop into the game. So if we go to the game, right, we take a look at the HDD system, chapter 4 story. First of all, we only got 5 stages. We only had 5 stages for the entirety of story mode. And so I think this stage is going to be able to illustrate what I mean. So what you're going to see are these weird little nodes where you have to sort of stay in place and beat everyone else up. So now this is gated, and now you have to wait for these guys to like explode, right? Sort of like destroy themselves before you get to the next section. We have this one now.
Not gonna lie, so far, it doesn't sound bad at all for me, if I'm honest.
And so you have this section too.
Again, as I said though, I think just ripping it out right before 1.2 potentially wasn't the best idea, because not having that buffer area to fill it with something else that adequately allows you to do that part of the game. But so far what I'm seeing here, I'm not against it, because as I said, when I first started playing this game, I want to explore more of the world. I want to do more of the things in the world because it's a cool world. TV's legit killed ZZZ for me. Yo, Chase, what is going on, man? Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Right. Where there's
good to be back. It's good to feel good as well.
And you're just walking through here and to this combat stage. Kind of awkward.
Yeah, see, for me, this is what this exactly looks like what it is, what I've just said, to be fair. They removed the TV system because people wanted it gone from the story element part of the game, but they're not quite ready to implement the alternative in regards to you physically doing it within the game. And as I said, there's going to be things that you're not going to physically be able to do, stopping a train, getting on, all that sort of stuff, where it's a little bit too grand for the game. But other mechanics are definitely going to be able to implement it over from the TV system into an exploration part of the game. I just don't think they're anywhere near ready for that. Again, future updates, you might have those things in the game actually, where this actually feels a little bit more, you know, enjoyable and more rewarding, shall we say?
Right. And it's these little in-between segments that feel like they were added in to make up for the lack of TV mode. I
think they definitely probably
create
were.
A sense of progression from combat to combat,
and probably
in
a rush as well.
In the stage way, but there's not really a lot here that honestly I feel like anyone should care about. And
I think what it says to me is it's almost like the template, the base of what this sort of stuff potentially can become in the future, hopefully. When it gets fleshed out a little bit more and they've got more time to develop these sort of areas of the game. Because let's face it, when the TV system came in the game, they probably didn't expect people to hate it as much as they did, which I don't, just the way it was used sometimes. This wasn't a backup plan. Now they've had to go to it, and they haven't fleshed it out yet, have they?
The open world exploration of these areas, right? They're not open world. I mean, like the exploration of these areas are very, very limited, right? You have so many props, so many things sort of gating you, right, and keeping you in the lane, that it makes it feel very like awkward.
Linear. It's a linear game at the end of the day. Like, I think what the middle ground to get to is something like the exploration parts of Star Rail, in my opinion, when you go in between the major things happening in the game. You know, you're traveling around, there'll be some fights here and there. You might interact with something that maybe goes to a cutscene for something that's a little bit too grand for you to actually be doing in the game. Again, stopping a fucking train, a subway train or something like that to get onto it. You know, I feel like this could definitely work. It just needs a bit of time, man. It needs to be cooked a little bit more.
I'm going to talk over this segment because I forgot to mention it, but I feel like a lot of people will say, well,
yeah, people hated the TV system, didn't they?
Universe in Honkai Star Rail. You're walking between stages like Honkai Star Rail. And in reality, no, you're not. Because what does Honkai Star Rail have in comparison to Zenless Zone Zero? Well, each character has their own overworld ability. Especially...
Yeah, again, though, I feel like this might be a little bit, and now maybe I'm judging too early. I feel like I'm going to sneeze. I feel like it's a bit of an unfair comparison, though, to go directly to Star Rail. I think it could become something like Star Rail, but Star Rail was designed with that in mind, wasn't it? You know, I think it's a little bit unfair to take a game that was designed specifically to be made like this to a game that was designed specifically to be made like this. People didn't like it, so now it's trying to move over to be somewhat like this. They're not going to do it in one patch, are they? Let's face it. You know, they've literally taken the TV system out and replaced it now. It was gonna be somewhat limp on arrival, really. I think this is something that, like, is gonna be maybe 1 or 2, 3 patches in the future where it gets to be more like what it's gonna be like, I would think. Well, I would hope anyway. I hope that it gets to be a little bit more than this. Although I'm not massively negative on this. Haven't played it yet, so I can't say. But yeah, I definitely do. I do think we'll see it get towards the destination a little bit more in the future.
With the recent ones, like with Fei Xiao, she runs around with the tornado. Firefly, I think she like blows people up in the overworld. There are a lot of ways you move and maneuver between the stages that are creative and different between each character, and they have like very specific effects on the combat that involve player input. When you are just walking in between from combat to...
You're going to be limited to a degree though, aren't you? Because this doesn't have all the different attributes that Star Rail has, you know, like, where I agree, that'd be kind of cool, you know, depending on what character you're using in the overworld. You could enter combat, say you're using a stunner, and you get the jump on a character, and you use an ability, and it adds a set amount of stun to them as soon as you enter the combat, you know what I mean? Like, that could be cool, or an attribute, or whatever. That could be cool.
Combat, all you're doing is walking, and the way Jane Doe walks compared to someone like Caesar, there is no difference. So this is what I mean in terms of like what is removed and what didn't get put in. What you see is a lot of what makes Zenless Zone Zero boring, and not what makes Zenless Zone Zero feel fun or unique. And sorry, I know there's a difference between how Jane Doe walks and Caesar walks, but in this combat stage, you literally cannot walk, so you're just running through each combat. And like, don't get me wrong, the environments and everywhere are very pretty.
Also, I do love the whole aesthetic of Zenless Zone Zero. It's a nice place to be. It reminds me of Valorant in that sense, where it's like when you're in the game, it's like, it's nice and pretty, you know what I mean? It's got a good vibe to it.
They're very, very cool to look at. I think the environments team did a very good job, actually. But I just don't think that this is a valid replacement. And here, put yourself in the perspective.
Obviously, I'm assuming. I think this is a temporary replacement. I'm going to go out on a limb, and I think this is a temporary replacement, if I'm honest. You know, it's short notice, it's temporary, it's a start, I guess. And at the end of the day, people wanted the TV system gone. They couldn't expect a fully fledged, fully fleshed out replacement like that right off the bat, could they? I think it's a little bit too much to expect that.
Chances are you're not listening
unless
to
you're
what
willing,
the dialogue is in the background.
To wait multiple patches for it to be removed, you know?
You're not listening to Lighter, Belle, Bernice, any of the banter that's going on, and so you're missing a lot of that character interaction. And so if you're playing through this for the very first time, what you're not doing is really paying attention to what the character is saying. Not only are there so many sound effects, You can clear the fight very easily. This is hard mode, by the way, before all the dialogue is even dispersed.
You ain't got an name, bro.
So you don't even get to hear a lot of what Bellum says. You don't even get to hear a lot of what Lighter says too. And so you miss out on a lot of the character dialogue, the interactions, and the banter, right? And I think that's a big part of Zenless Zone Zero specifically. Because what did Chapter 1 do? Chapter 1 introduced you to Nekomata, who joined the Cunning Hares, right? Chapter 2 introduced you to the Bellabog Heavy Industries. Chapter 3 introduced you to Victoria Housekeeping Company. Chapter 2 Intermission introduced you to Zhuyan and Qingyi. So, like, there are so many character introductions, and it is all about showcasing these characters and presenting to you that they're a team and that they talk with each other. They have their enemies like Bellum and Pulchra. I really value that quite highly, and I feel like with the lack of TV mode, you get a lot less of that. Not only do you breeze through the combat stages way too quickly to hear any of the banter, the interactions, but you take away a lot of what makes them.
Well, that's where I said this before in regards to those sort of parts when I was speaking about the TV system. Typically in like an action adventure story game, you have a little bit of a cool down period, a downbeat part, don't you? In between a bit of combat, you know, like where characters are having to squeeze through a location or walk across an area where there's not any enemies, and it's nothing difficult. You're just typically doing your W key and you're moving forward as the characters kind of talk to each other, and you get a little bit of progress in that regard, don't you? I think that's the way to do it, is have that little bit of and I'm not saying you've got to be squeezing through or doing mechanical things. You could just be walking through an area where there's not any enemies and it's just a bit of a traversal thing, maybe some chests to open, that sort of thing. And the characters are talking to each other as it goes along, you know, just so you get that context, and it's not happening while you're in a fight. Because obviously when games do that and characters are there talking to each other and you go into a fight and you're like, I cannot hear you, and then you get out the fight and the end of the conversation, you're like, what the fuck happened? I don't know.
Zenless Zone Zero so special. I also think you have a lot less creative expression. So if I go over here, and
it was unique, the TV system was as well.
The TV mode that we did get from 1.2 as a patch is not in the story, but rather it's in these stages. And look at this.
Which is what I always said. I said personally, for me, the TV system was a good system. It was just implemented wrong. Now, I know, obviously, we need a better replacement than what's probably here. That is, I can see that now. It definitely needs to be a better replacement. But I think the TV system in the story mode was not great, in my opinion. It's unique and it was cool, but after a bit it was like, yeah, I kind of would like this in separate parts, or maybe just here and there in the story, and then allow me to interact with the story in a different way. i.e. I'm actually playing the game, I'm moving around, I'm exploring in a linear area, whatever it might be, which is not necessarily through the TV system, because sometimes it did get a little bit like, oh, just get me through this TV section now, you know, a little bit here and there. And I was an enjoyer of the TV system, so I can understand people who weren't. It was dire.
Look at this Bang Boo. Look at Eos. He's riding a motorbike, and what you're doing here is going through this sort of racetrack almost, and taking these like lightning power-ups and just zipping through, right? I would have loved to see this.
See, but like, how they're bringing racing into the game. Why can't that be a thing that is in the future? Where instead of doing that, you're actually doing it. You know, you're actually racing it. You do it physically within the game. Again, probably short notice for them to get all this sort of stuff into the game just yet when they've gutted it out the game as a system. But I feel like the potential's there to replace it with something like that.
In the final stage of 1.2's story, just going through all of this and trying to, the player wants to go through as fast as possible, right? Just to illustrate this idea that they're a part of this race, they're a part of Tour de Inferno, right? And so you go through that, right? You're going to collect all these coins, and it's the idea, like, even though you don't have to play through this very quickly, the idea is that playing through it quickly is very fun, right? So, like, this is a fun stage, and I would have loved to see that, some of that anyway, in the Tour de Inferno. As well, the racing stage too. Like, don't get me wrong, I wouldn't want, like, the bike racing stage to be removed from Zenless, but I felt like this could have had its place there too. And you have this one as well. This is another sort of stage for the TV mode that used unique assets for TV mode, like these desert tiles, right? And also these rock tiles, which previously, right, you weren't able to interact with at all. And we can see that there's optimizations for TV mode already with this fast forward system. They've had this before, but it's a lot less awkward now with the weird pauses in between.
Yeah,
I
it was
can go
annoying.
through these blocks, right? And even though it's not much, like, this is another set of gameplay and another way for the writers to creatively express faith in Bell and Wise's role in the story. And that's really what is missing.
Again, I do think the TV system was good in that regards, in terms of a representation of the proxy's role in what they were doing. It did feel like that, but at the same time, I felt like sometimes it was just a little bit too abstract from what you were doing. I would rather have been doing it as the characters in the area. You know what I mean? And I understand with the mechanics of what you're doing sometimes just wouldn't translate over into the game because it doesn't have those capabilities, and that would take a long time for them to get to there, you know, like, say, doing all the things you're doing there within the levels. But we can get to somewhere, some kind of middle ground, again, that's a little bit like Star Rail, and then even throw off, you get to a node, and then you go into the TV system just to bang through some little thing, you know, and then you go back to traversal. So you're not traversing in the TV system, but when it's like unlocking something, you do it in the TV system where it's just a little bit smaller, a lot less, and it takes you like 20-30 seconds, but it just adds, it fleshes it out a little bit as well, and then there's some exploration in the instance part of the level as well.
Is Bell and Wise's role in the story. Now, 1.2 kicks off the story, kicks off this chapter by throwing Billy and Bell, or whoever you pick, probably Wise, into a hollow.
Who chooses Wise? I'm sorry. If you did, you're wrong. Who chooses Wise? It's like choosing male rover over female rover. But when it comes to Wise and Bell, dude, it's like the design for Bell it just clears Wise all day long. And it's not even just because she's a freaking chick. It's just Wise just looks like they put half the time into designing him that they did into Bell. You know what I mean? You just, like, straight up, you made the wrong decision.
Right? They drive the truck off the cliff into a hollow.
Facts.
And so what you're missing
wrong.
is this depth of expression. What I mean by that is that in the stage where Bell and Wise are thrown into a hollow, they don't have access to HDD. They don't have EOS deployed. This is a perfect stage to have this sort of combat-to-combat stage setup where you don't have the TV mode. Because what is missing? Well, Bell and Wise are not interacting with HDD. They are not interacting with EOS. They do not have a bird's eye view of all things. But with everything else following that, where they do get the HDD system set up and they are able to provide support as a proxy to the Hollow Raiders, that is the depth of expression you're missing. You're not seeing things through their eyes anymore. You only walk around as Caesar and you see EOS kind of follow your tracks and you hear the banter, but again, you can't really pay attention to the banter because you're too focused on the combat that is happening in front of you. Now,
that's why they need to stagger the combat and the expression between the characters. You know, you need to have a bit where you're walking, the characters do all that. Then you get into some combat, so it's not overlapping. I get what he's saying totally, especially with the expression in regards to you're not seeing it through the proxy's eyes anymore, because that is a major thing in the game. And I do that. That was the cool thing about the TV system. I still think it can be done really well without the TV system being there and having it in some regards, whether you control EOS when you're doing that and you're walking with the group of people. That could be kind of cool. I don't know. But then maybe only when you're in the non-combat areas and then it just automatically switches you when you get to combat. I don't know. Maybe that wouldn't necessarily work. But I think there's ways to get there, you know, to get there where this traversal thing without the TV system could work really well. They've got to build on it. Yeah. And it's going to take a few updates, I think.
I also want to like illustrate a difference right now. You might be wondering, why didn't you complain about this in 1.1? Why didn't you say anything about 1.1? Well, it's because 1.1 is completely different. 1.1 is completely different from 1.2. And why is it? Well, if you go to the video archive, right, you see, first of all, there's 4 sections: Asian stories, Faith in story, and a special episode. Special episode is what we got for 1.1 as far as what the story is. It was a filler patch. It was a filler story. It's how I think of Zenless Zone Zero. What it's going to be is 1.0 main story beat. 1.1 is going to be filler. 1.2 another main story beat. 1.3, guess what it's going to be? Probably another special episode. Probably another filler sort of episode, an intermission, before we get 1.4 where everything sort of comes together. And I'm highly anticipating that to involve Miyabi and Section 6 and Hollow Zero, a huge, huge story chapter. So, got back to my point, right? 1.1 special episode. Why is this different? Well, it's because you're not following Faithin's story. Belle and Wise, Faithin, they have no involvement in this story whatsoever. And so you're playing as Jane Doe. You have nothing to do with Faithin, Belle, and Wise, and so there's no HDD system. There is no TV mode. That's why 1.1 felt very good. It's because when you're playing as Jane Doe, you are interacting with the world as Jane Doe. Versus...
Maybe that's what'll happen more. Belle and Wise will be major parts, and they'll stay major parts, and they'll still kind of be the protagonists, but you'll see it through the eyes of people around them potentially to get around that. I don't know. I think this is something that Hoyo will solve, if I'm honest. I do. I think in, a year's time, people will look back and go, it's better now, the system that's been applied. Again, as somebody who enjoyed the TV system, I did. I just think it was implemented in not the best way. I still think they are going to get to a point where it will be better. Because when I first started playing Zenless, when you were going around your first instances, which were smaller than what you've got now anyway, I was just like craving for that. Like, I want that kind of Star Rail experience here. I want to be able to run around a little bit more and feel like I am a part of what's going on here rather than seeing it through the proxy's eyes. Because of all the characters in the game, which I get it, it's one thing that's cool about Zenless is the proxies, because they're not these chosen one all-powerful characters. They're just a couple of like hacker kids who tend to be ahead of the game. They've got the edge, which is cool. But like, I can still enjoy myself in terms of the exploration through the eyes of the other characters, or with EOS tagging along personally for me, and still get that feel to the game. I've got to play it first yet, though. I'm saying all this and I ain't touched it. I might touch it and be like, yeah, I get exactly what he's saying.
Is when you're playing through 1.2 story, yeah, you do have the trial characters, right? If I go to story mode, I go to easy over here. If I go to the first stage, right? That is the first stage. It's reordered because I didn't collect all the boxes. But you're playing through Billy, right? You're playing through this stage as Bernice. You're playing through this stage as Caesar. But you're not really playing through the story as these characters, because what happens in between the stage? You go back to controlling Belle. You go back to interacting with the NPCs as Belle. This is Faithin's story. This isn't Caesar's story. Faithin is being introduced to Caesar and the Sons of Caledon, but that's it. Everything else comes back to Faithin, to Belle and Wise, and Belle and Wise are some of the best like contributions to gacha gaming as a genre, because they're their own fleshed out characters. They're not a self-insert like power fantasy wish fulfillment bullshit. Like,
yeah, it's true. You're not like the adjutant, even like something like PGI. You're not like a commandant. You're not just this disembodied character that's got a voice or some text, and then there is this power fantasy. You're surrounded by these ultra powerful characters. Again, this is one thing I do like about Zenless Zone Zero. I think it's kind of unique, the Belle and Wise situation, is because it's a little bit more, I don't want to use the word realistic, but it's not that same trope of like, you're a character that's just running this team, or you've woke up and you are the chosen one kind of thing, you know what I mean? You've got amnesia. it's just like you've reset on a journey that, you're these tech kids who are in a world that the skills they have puts them in a really good position to earn money on a side hustle. And that's kind of what they are. They're just really good at what they do, and they're getting deeper and deeper into this story that's ongoing in the world, aren't they? And I really like that about the game, actually.
Rover is. Sorry, I had to throw it in, right? Or like most not even like WUA
Genshin?
in
You
general,
know what I
but a
mean?
lot of gacha games are like that,
Yeah.
where the main character is just the self-insert for you as the player, and
Yeah.
you have like this crazy godly influence over the narrative and the story as a whole.
It's basically just your
Wise
avatar, isn't it?
are weak. They are neats. They are just the support. They are very, very much incapable of doing anything on their own. But at the same time, they are invaluable to the success and the survival.
So, like, what about maybe when you're doing the traversal bits within the, you know, the freaking, the hollows, whatever, that, I don't know, this sounds really simplistic, but Eos just hops up onto the shoulder of the character you're controlling, so it feels like that, you know, that connection's still there. And then when you're out of the hollows, you're interacting as them as a whole, so you still feel like the story's through their eyes in that regard. It's just that you're clinging on to one of those characters in the hollow, which you are anyway when you think about it. There's plenty of times in the cutscenes where Eos ends up hopping onto somebody or is being carried by somebody. So that kind of going into the gameplay itself, I don't think it's a massive stretch anyway, and would pull you out of that immersion that you are Bella Wise. Because Eos really, apart from being the navigator, isn't capable of doing anything in the hollow anyway. So just kind of being attached to the character that you're controlling, for me, wouldn't pull me away from that necessarily. But I understand exactly what he's saying, and he's right in regards to like his premise and the point and the whole idea of how Bell and Wise are integrated into this story. You know, they are the you know, they are the proxies, aren't they? And you know, it's quite unique in that regard. And again, the TV system itself was an incredibly unique system. I just think it can still be used on story beats with exploration that you're controlling the characters, just done in these little like puzzles. They become part of puzzles as you're moving through, and then it feels like you are Bell and Wise, and you're not just the bang boo hanging on the shoulder of the character. You know, you get to this thing that you need the proxy to do, and the EOS hops off, runs over to the thing, and then boom, you go into a little TV system that's a lot smaller, a lot more condensed, but has a little bit more of a puzzle mechanic to it, and there's not all the running around in the TV system, maybe, you know?
Of the Hollow Raiders, because they are
Hey,
the
what's up, Stutzer?
navigators, right? They provide invaluable support to them. They have their own role. And what I got with the story of 1.2 was a heavily muted and diminished sort of involvement from Faithin. I didn't really...
Again, this makes sense to me, though, because they've ripped something out of the game and they've not got a replacement
Caesar,
ready for it yet.
Bernice,
I think they will
mainly
get
walking through the stages as them and going back to Faithin, right? And this sort of jump between perspectives did not feel very organic at all. It felt very disjointed, and it felt like Bell and Wise were much less of a character because you didn't get to hear a lot of the banter from Bell and Wise.
Again, I love Belle's design, I do. I think she's one of the coolest looking protagonists in the gacha genre. You know? I think her design's great. You know, for the character that you are, that you were controlling, like, you know, I do. I think she's a really freaking cool design, man.
Wise or Fairy, for the matter, either. So, yeah, those are my thoughts on Zenless Zone Zero 1.2. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care, peace, and bye.
All right, man. Yeah, all fair points, and I can definitely understand where he's coming from. Again, as I say, I think they've took a fundamental feature out of the game that was designed for the launch of the game. The game was specifically designed around it in this unique core component, and then people didn't like it, and they've said, okay, we're going to take it out. They've took it out, and they don't quite have the replacement there yet. You know, I think it's clear to see that. Now I think it's which do you prefer? Would you have preferred the TV system to a stadium for a bunch of more patches till they get there, or rip it out now and then slowly build up to where they want to be? I think that's the question there, really. I do think they will get there, though. I think it's probably going to take time, though, because again, it was a fundamental core component to the game, wasn't it? And how the game was designed, really. So it's going to affect massively how the story's told, because it was a massive part of the storytelling in the game, in traversing into different parts of the game. So it's going to fundamentally change the way you interact with the game and how the story's told from the get-go. So yeah, I think it'll just take time. I think they'll get there though. I think they'll get there.